This video proudly brought to you by the fine people at Housemade Industrial. Whether you're new to knife making or a seasoned pro, visit housemade.us to up your game with affordable quality gear. What is going on? Welcome back to the OG Frenchie. In last episode, we used our mock-up handle to kind of create and design another friction folder. And in the last episode, we were able to take a leftover piece of Damascus that was pretty small. We forged it out into an actual blade, and then we profiled out the shape of a blade. We got the heat treating done, and it's pretty much ready to go minus the handle part. We did throw together scales in the last episode, but we haven't made a whole lot of progress on that. So in this episode, we're going to start there with the scales. We're going to be shaping them back to the profile that we want. And then we're going to also be talking about, and I'll show you some of the steps that I'm taking to create the spacer on the backside for the scales. There are some steps that you need to think through, and I'll show you kind of my take on how I do that. So without further ado, let's go ahead. We'll start with the scales. We'll get them trimmed out, and then we'll jump into the spacer part. Let's get it. All right, so in that last time-lapse clip, I was using the bandsaw to trim back the profile of our handle, and for the most part, we got it there. But I noticed something. The bandsaw would cut through this piece of Richlite. It devoured the wood, and then as we were getting into this material, which is new to me, it did not want to cut. So then I took it over to the belt grinder to try to grind some. It does not want to grind. This piece of material up front is jute micarta, Vibe Composites jute micarta. It's new to me. I have never used this stuff. I've always wanted to because I like the way that it looks. And for the most part, I think it's going to be really cool looking on the knife. But I ran into the problem of trying to shape this stuff, cut it and grind it, etc. It really is tough stuff. Hopefully you'll be able to pick up on some of the issues that we were running into. This doesn't really show it as good as it could, but it was really hard to cut and really hard to grind. So I want to take a second and do a little experiment to see what type of belt we should use to shape this. After doing some quick research online, the internets suggested that I use zirconia, which is a different type of abrasive. And for the most part, especially with wood, it works really great. I happen to have a fresh 120 belt for the 4x36 grinder, so we'll try some of that. I also want to see how it will do on a standard ceramic belt. I have 120 grit for this as well. Silicon carbide belt, and an aluminum oxide belt. So we have pretty much all four types of belts. Now, all of them are brand new. They're all 120 grit. I do realize that maybe it would be better to have a little bit lower grit, like a 60 or something. But for the sake of the experiment, these are the belts that I have that are all new, and it's the only grit that I have for the experiment. So let's go ahead and test this theory out some. We'll grind a little bit off of each belt, and then I'll share with you my findings. And that way you'll know the next time you're grinding some jute micarta, which belt you're going to need. First up, we have the 120 grit ceramic belt. Let's see how that handles it. Next up, we have the aluminum oxide. Now, we'll try the silicon carbide. And finally, we'll try the zirconia. So based upon this quick test, I would say that the winner is going to be the silicon carbide or the zirconia. Those two really removed the material pretty good without burning it. And I think in third place, we'd probably put the aluminum oxide, and in last place, the ceramic. So hopefully that little bit of information helps out in the next time you're going to try to tackle grinding some jute micarta. I'm going to throw it back up here on the silicon carbide belt and continue to profile this out some. So as the scales sit now, you can see there's quite a bit of room to add this without the blade affecting it. Now is also the time to open this up all the way and see where it lands in the fully open position. And you can see that the blade kind of starts to go down into the scales, if that makes sense. Like it does not line up like this. It actually goes a little bit further. So what I recommend doing at this stage is to take a look at where it's at in the open position and try to draw a line or sketch out a line that's going to match the position of the blade, because we have to kind of consider the overall profile of this thing. We don't want the handle scales to be wonky compared to this blade. So you can see my pencil mark here is more in line with the position that the blade's in currently. And then we're going to simply close the blade and make sure that the position of the spacer piece is not going to hinder the blade closing. So you can see it gets pretty tight back here, but if you just kind of play around with this and consider those couple of variables, then you can get a pretty good idea of where to put this and how to shape the scales. Let's go ahead. We're going to cut off the top portion here of the scales to narrow these scales down, and then we're going to be drilling out holes for the spacer and getting this going. So let's jump into it. All right, now that we have the spacer part positioned and the holes drilled, we're clamping it onto the back here just to make sure that it doesn't catch or touch. And it looks like we're good. So we're ready to go ahead and drill these two pinholes. Let's do it. All right, so for the back two pinholes, I have drilled an 1/8 inch hole, and I'm going to be using an 1/8 inch pin, one for the bottom and one for the top. This also brings me into another dilemma that I run into quite frequently, and that is the sizes of the drill bit versus the sizes of the pin. So here is the drill bit that we used. This is 1/8 inch. I've got a set of calipers here, and you can see that's reading just shy of an 1/8 inch. So 123.5, 121. If you get up into the flutes here, of course it's going to be a little lower, but 122 is about where this is. So it's actually a little shy of 1/8 inch. Now this was 126 when I started, and you can see I have it chucked up here in the drill. There's 123, so we're getting pretty close. And this is a really cool trick you can do if you run into the same problem, is you put your pin in a drill press, preferably, and then use a strip of sandpaper. And this works pretty well to kind of knock the pin back down in width very slightly. So you do some of this and then check it. Then you do some again and check it until it gets to be a perfect fit. And you can see I'm just pulling the sandpaper kind of tight and then going up and down the pin. And you may not think anything's happening, but it is slowly removing material. So we're just going to keep doing this until we get the right size for our pin. And by doing this for just a few minutes, you can see that the pin that would once not even fit in here now is fitting in perfectly. So now that we have this back pin in holding the spacer, we can now safely go ahead and punch out the next hole. All right, so now that we have the pins in the back done, and they're fitting pretty good there, we're now ready to go ahead and trace out the leftover spacer piece, and we'll just mark that with a Sharpie, and that way we can chop that up and clean it up. That's really the only spot except back here on the very end, and the rest is actually inside of the profile of the handle. So that just means we're going to have to continue to knock down the scales to get them down to the spacer piece. So there'll still be a little bit of shaping to do on this back part. Now, at this point, we got the blade done. We have the handle scales pretty much ready to go. Really, the only thing now to do is to begin to shape the handle, and I'd like to do that, you know, prior to gluing this up. So what we'll do is we'll just use these pins to go ahead and line everything up, and by shaping it, I really just mean contouring the outside. We'll probably do something similar to what I did with this one, where we've got kind of beveled corners. This is an incredibly comfortable handle. It really just is. It fits nice in your hand. These scales are already pretty thin, so we'll go ahead and just kind of trim up the corners, and then we'll be ready to move on. One thing that I will have to be paying attention to is the rate at which the material is grinding. This stuff is much harder to grind, so I just want to be careful that I don't overdo these two sections, you know, because they kind of grind at different rates. So anyway, I just thought I'd share that. We're going to go around the perimeter of each side and bevel them out. Okay, now that we've taken the time to clean up the handle scales and sand those up, and we have the blade etched and the little spacer piece somewhat etched, at least it'll match somewhat, we're now ready to go ahead and think about sticking this knife together. The next step is going to be recessing the holes here for the pivot pin. So currently we have our 1/4 inch hole drilled for these, but I want to recess the head inside of the scales similar to the last one that I did. So like that, to where you can't really see them. So to do that, we're just measuring the diameter of the head and picking the appropriate drill bit to go ahead and countersink this out. So I've already done that, and we have a 3/8 drill bit. Let's go ahead and get these 2 holes recessed, and then we'll be ready to stick this thing together and sharpen it up and check it out. All right, so there it is, recessed. We can drop the bolt in there, and it's pretty much a flush fit, so that'll be good. That's kind of what we're going for. Now that that is done, we're going to go ahead, use the epoxy to attach the back spacer piece, and once we have that done, it's just a matter of putting in the pivot bolt and then cutting and trimming our stopping pin. folder in the books. This is friction folder number 3 for me, and I am really digging it. It was a great journey of figuring some new things out. In particular, this jute micarta was definitely a challenge, and now that I've used it, I know what to expect. Hopefully the information in the video was useful to you guys with the different belts. I gotta say, all of the different belts definitely will grind the jute micarta. It's just that the silicon carbide belt, I feel like, at least for the grit that I had and the speed that I was running the machines, it cut the best. The zirconia was definitely pretty close to it, but it's hard to compare the 4x36 to the 2x42. It's just a different machine, so, you know, it is what it is. But hopefully that information was helpful to you guys. The ceramic did cut, but it just kind of gummed up the belts some. This material can burn pretty easily, and when it does burn, it kind of gets stuck into the belts. So just something to take away. Another thing that I noticed about this jute micarta, this is polished out to about 800 grit, and you can tell that there are different shades of blue. You have kind of this lighter patch of blue and then some darker blue. And I think that is just the material. I could be wrong about this, but the jute is kind of like a burlap fabric. And so what we're seeing here is that burlap fabric is closer to the surface, and that's why you're seeing that fabric, which is probably white, come in as a little bit lighter. And then in the darker spots, you're seeing more of that resin that they use to make this stuff. That would be my guess. I don't know if that's actually right, but I feel like that's probably what's going on. Here are the scales that I have, and you can kind of see what I'm talking about, how some squares are light and others are dark, and I feel like that's just kind of where the fabric lays. But it is interesting to me that I got kind of a splotchiness to this material. Maybe I just don't know how to finish it out, and if you guys out there use this stuff more than me and know how to get a super clean, uniform finish on this, drop it in the comments and let me know. But for me, this was a great knife build because I learned quite a bit, not only about the jute micarta, but just how to put together the friction folder in general. And being my third one, you know, I kind of tried to take into account some stuff from the last 2 builds and think about those things as we were throwing this together. So it turned out really cool. I'm really digging it. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hopefully you guys like the knife as well. Let me know what you think about it in the comments below. And as always, appreciate you watching and look forward to saying hey to you guys here soon. We'll catch you guys in the next one. Thanks so much.